How's it going? Is everyone having a good conference so far? Yeah, I don't know why my PowerPoint isn't showing up yet. Awesome. So today we are going to talk about how you write your book in 90 days. So not just writing a book, which is already a huge feat in itself, but how you can actually accomplish it in 90 days. So raise your hand if you've ever thought about writing a book. Yes. So it turns out most people have thought about writing a book, and it can be really challenging. There's a lot of mental stuff that goes into it. So today what we're going to talk about in this chat is how to write your book in 90 days, why you should write a book, how to write your book, and some insight into the self-publishing process, and time to brainstorm/plan your own book. So we'll actually do a workshop, so you all should walk away with a plan to finish your book in the next 90 days. So if you don't know me, I'm Alyx Coble Frakes. I am the president, CEO, and founder of The Agenda Period. This started off as a planner for women and menstruators to understand their hormonal cycle and then use that information to inform their planning and productivity. So this started out in 2019, and it was actually introduced at a U conference back in 2019. And so many people from the community have been supportive from the very first day. After we made the planner, we started to make an app. And now I have written a book for men about periods called Manstruation, a field guide to not sucking when someone around you has their period. So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk all about how you can write your own book. So the first thing we want to talk about is why write a book. So this is actually a huge bucket item list for people. An estimated 81% of people in the world say that they would like to write a book. And 97% of people who go out to write their book do not complete it. So only 3% of people who start out to write a book actually finish it. So that is a very interesting sound. So in last year, I decided I was going to write a book. I decided, I know I've got a lot going on. I've got twins who are toddlers. I run an app company. I have got a lot of stuff already happening in my life. But it's the year I'm going to write a book. I decided that in January. It was on my New Year's resolutions for 2022. And then my husband went on deployment. He's in the military. So he left for 9 months. And I thought, well, maybe this year is not the year that I'm going to write a book, because by the time he got back, I had had a really intense, really crazy year. And by the time he got back, it was the end of October. So I thought, it's probably not going to happen this year, but there's always next year. I will get this book done, no big deal. Then after one too many conversations with men about periods and trying to get funding for my company and trying to interface with decision makers for my company, I was really fed up with the response from men around menstruation. 50% of the population has a period in their lifetime. We spend on average 8 years of our life in the bleeding phase of our menstrual cycle. And yet, I could not get men to talk about this in a way that was productive, helpful, useful, or insightful. And in fact, it was often really freaking annoying to talk to these decision makers about this company, why it was important, and why it mattered. So I was very, very pissed off, and I decided, you know what? It's November 15th, and I'm just going to write a book for men about periods by the end of the year, because I thought, why not? I will just get all of these thoughts, and instead of going to therapy, I will just put it down in a book, and here we go. So I wasn't exactly sure what was going to happen in the process, but writing a book for men about periods changed the way I thought about men. It really changed my life and my perspective. And it finally knocked off this huge goal from my bucket list, which was to write a book, because it's something I had always thought about, but it seemed insurmountable. It seemed really complicated. It seemed like this mountaintop. And so I didn't know how I would actually do it. But I gave myself this really short period of time, and it happened. And so that's what I'm going to talk to you all about today, is how you can make that happen for yourself. So you might be wondering, if a book isn't on your bucket list, but you're into business, why might you want to write a book? It can help your business. So it can help you find focus in the work that you already do. It can give birth to a new fraction of your business like it has for me, like talking to men. I not only have this book, now I've had a podcast talking to men about periods, and I'm connecting with people that I haven't ever interfaced with before in my company. It's giving me a lot of new exposure. It's going to give my business a new way to get introduced to the public, because I was really focusing on half of the world, and now I can focus on the entire world with my business and different content that we've created, which is pretty cool. Help you gain clients, and it can even improve your personal credibility. So there's something that happens, that like the expert effect that happens once you've written a book. People want you to talk about it. People think you're a lot more serious because you have put in the time, energy, and effort into creating that content. Why write a book? It is a great way to create speaking opportunities. Hey, look at me at the U conferences talking about writing a book. It's already created speaking opportunities. It can create opportunities to be on podcasts, summits, workshops, and much more. So if you are interested in becoming a speaker or advancing your speaking career, writing a book is great for that. So again, I just think it's such a cute cover. We really want it to be fun, so I'm gonna bring this up as much as possible. So now we're going to talk about how you write a book. One of the things that made it easy for me to actually write this book is I had a lot of field research. I had already been spending 4.5 years building the agenda period before I wrote the book. I had had thousands of conversations about periods, right? So that's probably not your area of expertise, but all of you have something like that. You have your own area of expertise that you've been spending a lot of time thinking about. Maybe you're a parent. Maybe you have a different kind of company or organization that you've been working on building. You have got this expert skill set that you may not even be considering right now, that you have spent years honing your craft. So that's something that really helped me. I picked a topic that was easy. I already knew a lot about having conversations about periods with men, and I was really annoyed. So I had a lot of frame of reference when I sat down to write this book. Like I said, I had hundreds of conversations that did not go well. So I already had some challenges and some opportunities mapped out in my head. And I understood the landscape really well. So I would absolutely recommend that when you are sitting down, if you want to write a book, write it about something that you know really well. Don't decide, I'm going to go out and write a dissertation on rocket science, and I am not a rocket scientist, right? That may take you longer than 3 months. But if you stick to your zone of genius, if you stick to the thing you've already been honing your craft on, it's going to come out really easily. The next tip on how to write your book is to be creative. I really prefer talking over writing. And so when I sat down to think about what the book would look like, especially because I was writing a book for men, I decided I was going to have content in the book, and then I was also going to have an interview series to interview other men who I thought were doing a really good job advocating for periods in some way. And so what I did is I had 5 different interviews, and then those were all transcribed, edited, and put into the book. So half of my content was made by me interviewing people and having conversations, because that's a lot easier for me than sitting down and writing hundreds of pages of content. And so it's also a really powerful way to share stories from different people. I'll give you an example. The very first interview I did was with my grandpa, because he actually used his position of privilege and advocated on the library board to get free period products in the library in his community. So I had him on the podcast talking about how he brought it up and if that was weird for him. So he's also like 78, so I had an old man on the podcast talking about periods. So that is the first interview in the book. And so thinking creatively, maybe you don't like doing interviews, but what could be a creative way to build additional content into the book that you're creating? If you've been doing a blog series for many years, could those become chapters of the book, right? You don't have to reinvent the wheel. What content do you already have that could help amplify or create the content for a book that you want to write? I'm also a health and wellness coach, so getting through the coaching process is something that was really important to me. So at the end of every chapter of my book, there's a journaling section for people. So there are prompts, there are places for them to write, because I think it's important that men understand and unpack their own experiences, and it also works to the thing that I know really well. So I asked different questions at every single chapter, but this gave an opportunity for me to add length to the book, which is important. It gave me a chance to add something creative, and I think it's going to be really beneficial for people to have this reflection piece at the book. And I'm also a visual person. And just kind of in general, they say men are very visual. So there are lots of visual elements throughout the book. So I got a little overwhelmed at first thinking about how long would this be? And then I found a lot of creative ways to add length that were not just me typing hundreds and thousands of words on a page, right? So when you think of your own career, think of what additional ways could you bring content in that were not necessarily you just writing words on a page. I'm still working out the double clicker situation, so thanks for bearing with me. And then particularly for women, when we talk about how to write your book, knowing what to do when is really, really important. So women, whether we know it or not, we struggle when we are comparing our cyclical bodies to a linear expectation of the world. The entire world is set up over the 24-hour clock, which is how men's hormones work. Our hormones complete over 25 to 35 days, right? Men's hormonal pattern repeats every 24 hours. Ours takes 30-ish days to complete. And what that means is our mood and energy are not the same every single day, right? You've all experienced that in your own lives. We've got these days where we're really high energy. We've got times during the month when we're feeling lower energy. And because we have seen the standard as this, we do the same thing every day. Think about all the success books you've heard about, the miracle morning, right? Everything is about get up. High achievers, they get up at 5 a.m. every day, and they always do their workout every time, and they always do this, and they always do that. That works fantastically for men's bodies, and it works terribly for our bodies. And so when we continue to compare ourselves against this system and structure, we can feel really, really bad about ourselves. One of the number one things I hear from women is, I'm just not consistent. I don't know what's wrong with me, but I just can't get it together. Well, I'll let you know, we are consistent, but we're consistent based on the phases of our cycle, rather than seeing I need to do the same exact thing every day, because that's not how your body works. So when we just acknowledge that and understand that, we can feel a lot better. So I wrote my book with my menstrual cycle, and again, I wrote it over 45 days, and I did all of the writing portion in probably 30 of those 45 days, because I had 2 luteal phases when I wrote the book. So I didn't spend very many days at all actually writing, but because I knew when to focus on the writing portion, I would sit down and write 10 pages. And then I wouldn't write again for a week. And then I would sit down and write 15 pages over a couple of days, right? And because I understood and trusted the cycle, I was able to work in a way that was really, really productive for this process. So I really would encourage all of you to write your book with a cyclical process. And this is going to help you write your book in 90 days or less. So I spent when I was on my period is when I would do my planning. I did my outlining. I did figuring out all of my notes, figuring out the kind of content buckets that I wanted, outlining my chapters. Because that is the time when we are the most internal in our month, the most introverted time in our month. Then during the follicular phase, because I had decided during the planning phase, I was going to do all these fun interviews, but I didn't have anyone signed up. No one said yes when I started this process. I had to reach out to everybody. I had to coordinate with their schedules. I had to get them on board. So I did the outreach and the interviewing during the follicular and ovulation phase of my cycle, because this is when we have the most energy, we are the most extroverted, and we are the most social. So I used the time when I was the most social. Hey, can you be on a podcast talking about periods? Random guy from the internet, like, hey, can you come hang out with me for a little bit? Even last week I did my first street style interview where I just walked up to random men and asked them if I could interview them on camera about menstruation. And they were like, what? Right now? Right? I was like, yeah, I have my camera. Can I just ask you a few questions? I'm Alyx, nice to meet you. And I asked 10 guys, and 8 of them said yes. I was in the follicular phase of my cycle because I was just feeling peppy, ready to go, and I was harder to say no to during that time. So I used that to my advantage, right? I did all of my interviewing and outreach during the time when it's easiest for me to do that, right? So we don't have to be working against ourselves. We can understand how to work with the phases of our cycle. And then, my deep-seated anger comes out during the luteal phase. And so that's when I would sit down and do my writing. I was just like, this is stupid, and what's going on here? Or blah, 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 blah. Pulling out this content. I would do all of that during the luteal phase. And it just worked so amazingly. So This is a process. If you haven't checked out the Agenda Period app, that's not what this talk is about, but go check it out. But this kind of cyclical thinking really supports us in all of our efforts, knowing we don't have to do everything every day, no matter what your career is, but we can just focus on when to do the right thing with our energy. And it's life and work just gets easier when we do that. So, I'm going through all of this a little bit quickly because I want us to have time for some workshop and questions. So if you've got other questions, I'll definitely have time to answer those at the end. And so I wanted to just give you insight, again, into this entire process. So I looked at a lot of different options after I had written the book, and the first thing that I needed to do to publish the book was pay an editor. So you have to understand, what is your zone of genius? I am not a nitpicky, detailed person. So I found somebody and I paid an editor. That was one of the only things that I paid for during this process. Super duper worth it because this person went through all of my content with a fine-tooth comb. So that was really fantastic to have that support. Then I also had support with formatting and the visual elements, creating the graphics, because that is also not my zone of genius. So that's something else that I went through. And then I was also looking at how to publish the book. So I have decided to go through self-publishing, through Kindle Direct Publishing, because the process is actually very easy online. And anymore, it's pretty challenging to break into traditional publishing. And after you do break into something with a nonfiction book, it can take 6 months to 2 years for that publisher to be ready to publish your content. And I'm like, the world needs it now. The world needs to have men talking about periods like yesterday, so let's just go. And then I'm only doing the ebook version right now with the intention to show numbers and get picked up by a traditional publishing agent later on in the process, because this book is going to be a series of like 5 or 6 other books with similar content. So the goal is to eventually have this picked up. It's already with a publisher right now, so fingers crossed, we'll see what happens. But I know that that's on my vision board, and I definitely want to get this published by someone else. But anymore, the self-publishing route can be really good because it's faster, it's less costly upfront, and regardless of whether you do publishing with a publisher or self-publishing, the expectation of marketing the content is on you. So you have to figure out, how are you going to market this content, which is the other thing I've done strategically. Is I am continuing to interview men, and I'm going to push out their podcast, and every time I release a podcast episode, I will be able to promote the book again. Hey, if you haven't got your copy of Manstruation yet, check it out. Here's where you can purchase it, etc. So some of the most challenging pieces around the marketing were going to be the same, whether I self-published or went through a publishing agent. And so those are some of the things to consider as well. So how to actually get to the stage of launching your book once you've written everything. Again, launching is an ongoing project. This is not a one and done. I've got a lot of stuff coming up for the launch, which I will show you at the end. So please, everyone here, sign up for your free copy of Manstruation. Here's my plug for it. So we're going to do the ebook for free for the first couple of days. So right now we have a landing page that is collecting signups, and so everyone can sign up on that page, and as soon as the content is ready, they will be able to go and download the book for free over the first couple of days. And then again, continuing with the Manstruation podcast. Now, I've gotten men to say yes to coming on my podcast who have much bigger audiences than I do. So the Agenda Period audience were around 7,000 people. I've had people with 1 million followers that are going to be on the podcast, or who I've already recorded their issue. 300,000, 500,000, men from all over the planet with much bigger audiences have agreed to say yes to talk to me about periods for some reason. So I'm going to use all of their audiences to help push the book out to a further demographic reach than what I'd have on my own. So whatever your content is, can you think of a creative way to engage other people's audiences into purchasing what you have created? Next slide. Ooh. Awesome. Okay, so now I want you guys to take some time brainstorming. Brainstorming your own book. So what are topics that you could write about? I want you to actually jot some stuff down. Thinking about, when could you commit this year to blocking off a 3-month writing window where you would just sit down, write out the content over your menstrual cycle over a couple of months, and just knock out the content. and really thinking about how could you set yourself up for success. So I want everyone to take some time, write it down, because I saw a lot of hands at the beginning saying they wish they could write a book. So let's take some time to actually put pen to paper, and I'm also happy to answer any questions while we are doing this process. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know. Let's see. Can I pull up my outline? 1 second. I'll see if I can just pull up my book for you. Yeah. Okay. So she said, What are your next steps after you figure out you've got the content? What did I do next? Did I organize everything? Can you show what's on my screen now? So there are different kinds of editors. So there are content editors who are more kind of like help you figure out where all the pieces go. And then there are actually editors that just do like a word count. So I had all of my content really well organized before I had an editor come in. So that just kind of depends on if you want someone to help you with the content editing and organizing the flow and putting all of the chapters together. You can pay someone to do that. I had already run through that process on my own. So I had some beta readers. I had sent it out to a couple of people to help me organize what the structure was. And so for some reason, it's not pulling up my full table of contents on this one. But one of the things I did in my introduction is I wanted to lay it out for guys like what they could walk away from in this book. So that's really like the call to action is really up top at the book. So it's a field guide you're going to walk away with, an in-depth look at the menstrual cycle, the thing you should have been taught in 5th grade, a deep dive into the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle and the way you can support someone in your life when they're going through this, interviews from other men and non-menstruators around how they can be good allies, insight from women and menstruators, things that frustrate them, and a deep dive into your own experience. So that's how I organize my chapters. But again, the kind of 2 options there are you do that first and then have someone just edit for polish, or you get a content editor. Can I share my resources? So who I used for my editor? Yeah, she is in the book. But if you want to connect with me offline, I can share who my editor was. She was someone who I originally met in Iowa City. She doesn't live in Iowa anymore, but she's like another Iowa local. So I think Jessica's really great. I know. It's long. Yeah, awesome question. Any other questions? Yeah.
What if we don't have a regular menstrual cycle, so we don't really know like the week that we should be menstruating because we take hormones to do something about that?
Yeah, so
when am I productive?
You could check in with the moon phases and see if that was helpful for you. So you could kind of track around the moon. So if you were doing that, the new moon is when it would be matched up with your period phase. Then as the moon is growing, so the waxing moon is your follicular phase, full moon is ovulation. We tend to have a lot of energy. You even think like people get weird as hell over the full moon because there's like this weird peak of energy. And then the waning moon is the luteal phase. So if you go to the Agenda Period blog, there is a track your cycle with the moon phases, and you could start there.
I was going to mention something in regard to that. I was somebody that's quite skeptical of that, and I know a lot of people have. But if you think the moon doesn't control things, just talk to the ocean. And the moon is really, really powerful. And if you've ever worked in medical or nursing or with children, you know that there's some power there. So even if you are on a regular menstrual cycle, you can look at the moon and see some other
correlations.
Yes.
Awesome. So yeah, this is just a time for brainstorming and questions. And please, everyone, if you put the slide back up, Please scan the QR code and go sign up for your free copy right now, and then send it to 5 friends who could use this information. And right now my list is at 112 subscribers. Let's blow this list out today, because we need hundreds of people to download this book so people can get better about the cycle. Awesome. That's all I got, guys. Thank you so much.